for a total. For we got an ending checkbook balance of 13,929.92, which means we went up 332.59. And we got about, I can't remember exactly, it's probably somewhere between 8 and 15 people that have not joined. So that's what we're going to lose in members. Or if I'm going to write them a letter and see if they have just forgot. But, you know, that's been sort of a normal thing for the last 3 years. We keep losing. We had 100 and something members, now we're down to about 74 paying members, I believe. And we got the national, I go to the national thing. We have spent so far $1,927. And Donna made a large deposit for, I guess, its tables and the banquet and your entry pass of $3,467. So that's real $1,540 to the good on our not often adventure so far. And I'll get the 50-50 ready, but it's not going to be much money this time.
Thank you, Charles. You mentioned the national, the upcoming Labor Day weekend is the Mid-South Regional, and it is being held in Dalton. So I think that's what he was referencing as far as the finances. So in old business, we'll just continue on with the Mid-South Regional. It is being held in Dalton this year. That's a change for us. We're used to going up to Chattanooga. Dalton is a tad closer and lots of advantages. It's some very nice looking hotels, and price-wise, everything is less. No parking fees. You can drive up to the convention center. You can drive to lunch. You can drive back to your hotel. So it'll be an easier logistical situation. The group of us went up there and met with the facility manager on May 7th to look around, get an idea of how things would potentially be laid out. There will be a, okay, Dan, help me out. What am I trying to say? The outdoor sale. There will be a tailgate event this year. So you'll also see that. General chairs, Bob and Fran, anything to comment?
Yeah, we spent the weekend up until late last night. Fran and I, that is, we drove up to Dayton to the National, and we promoted our event, and that's a poster we had up on our table, and generated lots of interest. As Mary mentioned, we're having a tailgate, and that seemed to be kind of a hot item with people. I was kind of curious about that. So I met a bunch of people from different chapters up there. Nobody from Atlanta. I did meet 3 people from the Atlanta area who, a couple of them at one point were attending our meetings, and they're not for different reasons. And we can talk with them, bring them back into the fold. A couple of very knowledgeable people among others. There was a meeting that Mary asked me to go to between all 4 chapters to get feedback with the national chapters committees about what we could do differently and what we could do better. And there were some lessons learned there. I did glean some information from some other chapters, which I'm going to share with Mary and present it all to you with as she sees fit. We haven't had any discussion about what I saw. There were probably 350 tables, big hall, half again the size of Chattanooga. A lot of empty tables. So Jim Coulson from our group was there. The kids, Glenn and Sherry were there. There were a couple from Knoxville, one from Nashville. Three from Birmingham, I think. Anyway, it was an interesting show. The programs were good. Ours are going to be better. So. What can I say? I have registration forms for our event available for you to sign up. I don't have the latest count on attendees and registrations so far for our event. You talked with Donna?
Okay, she will be here today.
Okay. there any questions about our event? Chris is our exhibit chair, Chris Martin, and he's been doing a bunch of work, talking to a bunch of people. Would you like to speak for a moment about where we're at with the exhibit, Chris?
The folks that are going to be exhibiting, I've pretty much got a final list.
Chris?
And we've got I've got a good final list of the exhibitors. It's going to be a collection of clocks and watches and I think tools, perhaps some tools. So looking forward to a good exhibit so that you can see some of the talent that resides in our group. You know, I've got a couple of mine, you know, just to show you the low end of the talent in the group, and then there's going to be some that'll just blow your mind when you see what they've done. So I'm looking forward to it, and I hope everybody will come up and look at our exhibit.
Maybe important here now, anything from Tuesday night, I mentioned you had about people there. Anything else to add? Nothing to add? And they, Tuesday night is a meeting all summer long?
Yes. Except for fourth. The school's closed on the week of the 4th.
Okay. Week of the 4th of July, whichever date that Tuesday is, they're closed. And Memorial Day, Labor Day, they'll be open on Tuesday. So only one known closure at this point, and that will be the week of 4th of July. Okay,
One other thing, Mary, I have the registration forms right here. I also have volunteer sign-up sheets. We need volunteers for almost every committee needs to be there also. Giving out 10, please check these out. We're going to.
okay. Next item, the national meeting of NAWCC will be 2024, where we are the host. That will be in Chattanooga. So, General Co-Chair is Chris Martin, Glenn Kitts. Anybody have information about that meeting?
It's still very much in the planning stages. I'm not sure that a contract has been signed with the convention center yet. There's been a lot of going back and forth about costs. You know, National is, since our last one in 2015, National has really stepped up and is handling a lot of the tasks, which is great. But right now, I know that they were close on a contract for the convention center. Once they've got that, then they're going to be negotiating with hotels in the area. So
On National, who's on the hook for any losses during the convention? Is National on the hook, not us?
Like, I mean, Chattanooga or Dalton?
Chattanooga.
So,
I've never been, what time of the year is
It'll be in June.
June?
This year's national just wrapped up.
Randy.
And the year that we have the national, we will not have the regional, is that correct?
That's generally what we've done in the past, yeah. Any other questions? Good.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. I wanted to do something to a certain camera one of these times. Another item of old business is something that you all have heard me talking about, and that is the bylaws for this chapter. The only copies I could come up with from various longtime members were so incredibly outdated that I just started over. And I believe, have you all now received a copy via email of the proposed bylaws?
We got email or?
It should have come by email, but I have an extra paper copy right here.
Mary, I didn't get a sense of what has changed.
The old bylaws, timeframes were totally different. Some of the officer responsibilities were different. I wrote these simply to reflect what we are currently doing and to memorialize what we are doing for the record, so that actually doing what they were going to do. So, you know, a backwards way of putting them together, just reflecting what we're doing. There were a couple of items that were brought to my attention. In about the second paragraph was a typo, which I won't belabor you with. Another recommendation that I put on the bylaws, the date that they were approved, which makes a lot of sense. Another item was whether we want to do our officer elections by show of hands or by paper ballot. During my time in the organization, we've done it by show of hands. Recommendation for paper ballot was in case there is any controversy. So I'm open that to the membership. What do you want to try and do paper ballots? Do you think that's a wiser approach? Yes, George.
The only reason I think you need paper ballot is if you have more than one person running for one office. You just need to resolve that for the paper ballot as opposed to a voice vote.
Okay, so I will amend that. So basically, if we have any contested positions, we'll have to make it a paper ballot. Otherwise, everyone's happy with show of hands.
Yeah.
And we typically do not have contested.
I so moved.
The last item also might be a little more controversial. It comes under dues and expenditures. Currently, we allow the treasurer to write the checks for the, as I refer to, the routine items, the rent here, the malpractice insurance. I can't think of what other routine ones there might be.
Supplies. Yeah, refreshment supplies.
Refreshment supplies to reimburse those who bring, yeah. So all of that we have left to the treasurer. And I would suggest that we continue that way up to a certain dollar amount. And I have put $200 being the limit at which the check needs to be approved, not just written by the treasurer. As I wrote the bylaws, I said approved by the president. But one of our members thought such items should be brought to the entire membership to be approved, not just the president. So any thoughts about which method you think is appropriate, safe, without being unduly burdensome?
The
Yes.
problem with bringing it to the entire group, there's time issues.
I agree.
That's the only issue with that.
Unless we did it by email. Right? I understand. If you don't vote, you can't complain about what happens.
You could also bring it to the board.
Okay, Randy is suggesting that any expenditure over a certain dollar amount be brought to the board for its approval.
Or just one board member, maybe president and one board member. So the whole board.
You already have the president and the treasurer, and you know, if I had a personally selected vice president because that person was my buddy, that might get a little.
That's why you have the board of directors, the three directors. That's supposed to help balance that.
The $200 limit, that's just for extraordinary events. That does not include random insurance because those are coming up every month or every year.
The way I wrote them, my intention was that the ongoing expenses, routine expenses, we know are going to get more expensive, but it's not something out of the blue being purchased. So I didn't say we had to have officer approval for that. Also, $200 was just a number so that the treasurer wouldn't be burdened having to get approval on just everything. Yes, Charles?
So there are a lot of bills with over $200, like petty insurance, that's $300-400. This place is $17,000.
And that's why, yeah, and that's why I said those recurring bills would, the known recurring bills, the treasurer would have discretion to go ahead and pay those. So, does everyone agree with that aspect of it?
Yes.
And other expenses, somebody make me a motion on how we want, George, you have,
Well, I was going to say that it seems to me that a lot depends on the urgency of the need to approve an expenditure. Particularly if it's over $200, if we can't wait until the next regular meeting, I think the board should have, it should go to the board for approval. Particularly if there's a certain emergency, comes up. You can't wait for another month and a half. But I would say just poll the board members.
Yeah, the president and board members get their approval over $200.
the officers plus the 3 directors. Okay? For an amount over 200. Is everyone happy with that amount? Okay.
We need to put that in a motion. Or are you just gonna put it in?
I'm going to have to revise this and send it out. To revise bylaws, you have to have it in it. The final copy in everyone's hands for 30 days, and then you vote upon. There's no special urgency to this, so I'll just keep revising it. And potentially today, we will knock out all the controversy, and I can have Bob send it to the membership, and then we vote at our next meeting. And that's all I had as far as an amendment to the bylaws as I had actually put them together. I did get feedback via email from some folks and incorporated that. Any other thoughts? Has anyone read them? If you have insomnia, as you know, as it goes, it will put you to sleep promptly. Okay, moving along. Next item is a very sad one. Oh, come on, Charles, let's have some fun before we go into sad business. So we'll do the 50-50.
Sale meeting this time. I do these things in advance, so I don't have to secure tickets. So.
Okay, last 3 digits, 809. Okay, yeah. Congratulations. See, now you have to come every week. You're big luck in the family. Next item of business is not especially new to most folks, but it is incredibly sad that you know that Glenn Alexander did pass away approximately 2 months ago. Thank you, sir. May 8th, so about 6 weeks ago. A memorial service was held at their local church here in the metro area. Interment was back in Alabama, and I understand there was a nice graveside service there as well. So we all miss Glenn tremendously. We will, thank you. We are sending, and I still need to get Charles to write me a check for $50 to National in honor of, in memory of Glenn. If you'll just get that check, I'll put the letter. His home address with National has been changed to Tennessee. which must be Teresa's address. I think Joe lives in Alabama. But when I was calling national, they said, oh, Glenn E., and he lives in whatever, Tennessee. And I'm like, apparently that is him, so for the record. But we'll send a $50 donation to national in his memory. Okay, next item. And as Bob had mentioned, he thinks it will be an avenue to have a remote speaker. If there were a nationally renowned speaker in New England, Chicago, wherever, and who would agree, we could tie that person in and have it live remote, if you want to call it that. So that our speaker would be up here on the screen, and yet we could interact with the speaker via the hour. We'd still have question and answer and such. So that could open up our options for programming as well. So and apparently you're having good luck with it. Yes? Okay. Moving on to new business. Because we had to move our meeting this month with the election process, we did become aware of a different Gwinnett County facility. Apparently it's up closer to I-85. I have not been there, but I think I would like to get a group of folks, 2 or 3 of us, to meet out there and see what we think of the place. I understand that the rental fees are lower, and that is always a good thing. We are committed through this calendar year here. We have paid the rent, so to speak, to be here. So we have time to think about this, but I'm going to ask any thoughts from the group about moving our meeting location.
Are you talking about Bethesda?
Yes,
It's 4.5 miles from here. And that's a county park, kind of new facility. It's real nice. Got several big rooms in the kitchen. It would be an appropriate venue.
Is the parking close?
Yeah.
What do we pay here and what would we pay if you went there? Do you have any idea?
I don't know their cost, and Charles, I think
It's $20 an hour.
$20 an hour at Bethesda.
I think that's what I saw on the sheet.
That's a heck of a lot less. We're paying triple digits.
We'd have to check that.
Yeah, if it's 20 an hour and we reserved 4 hours, which 3 might be enough, but we could go with 4, that still would be a considerable savings. Charles, do you know off the top of your head how much we're paying here
Approximately $1,300 a year.
per year?
Yeah.
So that's,
220 a month, I mean,
Okay.
220 a meeting.
thank you, Dan. So 220 a meeting here versus potentially 80 at Bethesda.
Here's another.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, where is it, right off of 85 and Jimmy Carter? Where is it located?
Yeah. Sugar Loaf parking lot.
Sure. Okay,
Generally go right up 29, turn right, and it's the first exit.
okay.
Right, it's a huge
Quick-
park there.
Quick show of hands in here right now, the people that are attending today. Is this closer to where you're coming from today? Or would the Bethesda be closer to you than here
okay,
today?
show of hands. What, amongst y'all, is this closer? Raise your hand.
Yes.
George and Jackie, I think it's probably closer. So that's 7. The rest of you, as best you can estimate, is Bethesda closer to you?
4 miles from here, so it's.
The distance is negligible and the hand show of hands is. Well, we'll continue thinking about that. Again, this will not change anything until the February meeting. Yes, Charles?
We barely take in enough money to pay for this, like, we're gonna be there.
So Charles is saying we're barely taking in enough money via dues to pay for this. Yes, Brooks?
Barry, one thing, they give us this room here, right over there. In other words, we're supposed to just have this, and when that came vacant, They said, just use it, nobody's got it, so we don't pay for that.
I think we're going to need to get 2 or 3 people to go out to Bethesda and take a look, just to really know. Do I have any volunteers? Dan, okay. And I will attend. Do you have any other folks? Bob? Okay. And Randy? Okay.
What's the name of the place? Bethesda what?
That's the senior center.
Okay.
Okay, well, the 4 of us will put our heads together and find a time where we can all meet up there and take a look, and we'll give you a report back at the next meeting. When we had to shift our date, the option was to move to Bethesda, I think it's right now. Move to Bethesda on the original date. And I was very concerned that would, the uncertainty of where some folks would be headed might impact our attendance. But if we make the arrangement, do it with advance notice, I think we can work around the attendance issue. Okay. The last item of new business I have is that we need to do an audit of our financial records. I don't believe that's been done in several years. I don't have any reason to suspect a problem, but it is prudent that the organization look at its money and those details on a regular basis. So I also need 3 volunteers. We have to get together at some time with Charles to do an audit of the books. Anyone eager to take that on, please?
I'm gonna have it, not me.
I'll put your name down. Your hand went up. Sold.
Gary Wallace did a great job last time, and I think, if we can talk him into doing it this time, I don't mind doing it next year, but I don't think ex-president is much order from my.
So I have put Gary's name down. Of course, I will have to contact him and see if he agrees to it. But I think we need more than one person doing this.
It's not that much. So
Pardon?
it's not that much to do it.
It's usually just one other person.
And Randy? So one per,
That's how it's been done in the past.
so Randy's saying that in the past, the audit has been done by one person.
If you're lucky, you can get that.
And it's usually done at Christmas parties.
Yeah, I thought it was done annually.
Charles, have you seen anyone do an audit? Dan, have you seen anyone do an audit? Has anyone audited your books?
Not like. Gary did it, 2 years ago?
That's
Maybe 2 years ago. I had the audit.
Okay. Well, so it's not as long a period of time as I was. I will contact Gary Walton and see if he would be willing to do that. Okay, very good. Does anyone else have any business to bring up? Yes, please.
I have to announce that our good friend Joe Marcus here is leaving us after today's meeting. He's leaving Florida. You will be missed. Just wanted to announce it to the group, so.
I've enjoyed it 30 years. Thank y'all.
We're in Florida.
Eaglewood, Florida.
He can be on our Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Give me a good email address.
We'll be sorry you can't be with us in person. I assume you were moving down to be near family. That's oftentimes the situation. Or to get away from the cold Atlanta weather, this 98-degree cold weather we're having.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other business or items to discuss? Donna?
I know, I'm late. That's okay. I just wanted to give you a quick financial report for the regional so far, because we were officially able to get everything started. And we currently have 68 members and spouses collectively coming. We have sold 10 tailgates so far. We've got 28 banquets sold. We've got 62 tables sold, and I have deposited $4,600 into our bank account. So we've got a good start. We're still early for registration though. So, it'll start ramping up more in toward the middle of July and then through August. So this is good for a good start.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you. This organization runs very, very smoothly. And the reason for that is that you have folks like Bob, Donna, Charles. You have folks who have made a commitment to do the background work of the organization. And the fact that we are having minimal glitches is a reflection of them consistently doing the job every month. So round of applause to our officers, please. And with that, I will turn the mic over to Jeff to introduce our speaker.
I guess I'll keep it short and sweet. George is going to talk to you. George Waterhouse, you all know him. He's going to talk to you a bit about cases and what you can do to them and how to make them better or preserve them.
How about a couple of groaners first?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
First one I got was, or received, was from Randy.
Randy's call.
So blame Randy. Why is it unwise to share your secrets with a clock? Because time will tell. The proud owner of an impressive new clock was showing it off to a friend. This clock, he said, will go 14 days without winding. Really, replied the friend, and how long will it run if you wind it? That's why they call them groaners.
And you want some in the newsletter.
I'm at the point in my life when I have to make notes, so read some of my notes here. This is all about making clock case parts and repairs, replicating wood movement parts, some of it employing a wood lathe. And we often see articles and programs related to working with lathes, mostly jewelers' lathes. And I can't really recall any program or bulletin articles related to working with wood lathes and wood tools to make parts or replacement parts for cases. So this is what the program's about. That's Chris Brown working on one of our chapter clocks in my shop backyard. Maybe first of all, many of you are unaware that there's a chapter 194, the cog counters. Anyway, that's.
Oh.
All right, George, you just failed remote class.
This was from our boss.
That one? I think so.
I shut you off.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. Different, well, it's the same manufacturer. They're both optical projectors.
Let me just, we ready?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Can you hear me back there, by the way?
Go ahead, George.
So according to my notes, if one's going to be involved in the restoration or repair of wood clock cases and wood movement parts, it's going to require access to a wood lathe, probably a router, a scroll saw, table saw, or a radial arm saw. And then you're going to need calipers, turning chisels, files, sandpaper, all kinds of things to go with it to get these things accomplished. Last, if not least, it helps to have access to a supply or source of wood clock cases, such as, or wood clock woods, such as mahogany, rosewood, oak, and walnut, frequently used on European clocks. And I've got a board up on the front here showing a variety of veneers with clear shellac on them, in case you want to see the difference. Secondary woods on many American clock cases are going to be poplar or white pine. And wood movements, the harbors are typically going to be a hardwood such as apple wood or maple. And the wheels are going to be mahogany, or I'm sorry, cherry.
Want me to be changing slides?
Yes. So, and the wood movement plates were oak and wheels are cherry. Many American clock cases were in mahogany and rosewood. Fortunately for us here in Atlanta, we have one of the best sources of veneers and woods. Do we have that?
Number, slide number.
More.
Just go through if you find it.
Did we have a picture of Carlton's card?
McLean?
The end.
Oh, it's at the end. Okay.
How many-
Well, anyway,
So back to the beginning.
go back to the. So there's a store in Atlanta on Hemp Hill Avenue at 14th. 14th just butts right up to it. Carlton's Rare Woods and Veneers. And they have a store in the front on the street, and in the back, they have a really sizable building filled with all kinds of veneers. It's incredible. And many of the veneers are in sheets like this long. It's a great source. We have at the end a card showing their phone number and so forth. So the first series of photographs I wanted to talk about was the problem that people see mostly with wood movement clocks, and that is broken teeth. You can see here, there's a wheel missing a tooth, here's missing a couple of teeth, missing teeth here. This is going to be a source existing wheels for some of the teeth, trying to match up teeth from spare parts and wheels that we could use that have the same teeth. So most of the problem we see with these wood movement clocks is broken teeth, and on harbors, broken leaves, pinion leaves. So the options are to make new teeth or to take and cannibalize another wheel or spare part. And I've got a box on the floor over here of all kinds of spare wheels and so forth that I got from Ward Francelon years ago, the late Ward Francelon. So if somebody's going to work on a wood movement clock, if
you're only gonna do one, it's probably not worth trying to gather all the materials. It might be easier to get somebody to, that makes these wheels. For example, Don Bruno is in Torrington, Connecticut, and he makes new wheels and new parts. And if you're not gonna do more than maybe one movement or a couple of wheels, it might, and you don't have a lot of the source material, it might be just as easy to go ahead and pay him to replace a wheel. So you just send in what's broken or whatever and have him make a new one. So like I say, I have a box on the floor there of a whole bunch of different wheels. Sometimes if somebody's gonna do something, some of my stuff might be a source. So occasionally I had to make new teeth when I couldn't find a wheel, a broken wheel that matches the same teeth. So for starters, I'll take the existing wheel, place it on a piece of paper, scroll over and around the same number of good teeth. That gives me a pattern which I can then mark or scribe off on a piece of cherry, with allowing for a base to glue in. Let's say we can go to the next. So there's a great wheel with 3 teeth that I took from an existing broken wheel. Excellent. And those are 3 of the teeth. I'm sorry, 3 of the wheels we just saw previously with the teeth I was able to get from other wheels. And then I've got them cut so that they'll be inserted and glued in place. So you want to try and match, like I say, the same teeth. And you got to cut down far enough so that you get a good base to glue them in, otherwise they're not going to hold. And the other thing is that a lot of these teeth that break on these wheels, there are at perpendicular to the grain on the wood, so they're kind of weak, those teeth, and they're the typically ones that are going to break. So if the grain is running this way, the teeth are going to break more often. So you got to cut down deep enough to have enough, to give it enough strength when you replace those teeth. Okay, the next. So I use the lightweight clamps when I'm gluing the teeth, replacement teeth in there. And plastic clamps work pretty well, small clamps. And next. So the next couple of photographs are going to be related to the broken leaves on this arbor. We got damaged pinions on that one. And here it's going to be a blank piece of wood that I'm going to use on my wood lathe to make a new arbor. Okay, next photo. Okay, so here's sort of part of the way in. I took that blank piece of wood and starting to cut the new arbor. Next one. Okay, I took it out of the lathe. And that's the new one's taking shape compared to the one that has broken leaves and a broken pinion. Next one. here's the new replica arbor, and the leaves on the pinion I had to cut out by hand, so I marked on the edge of the bottom of the pinion. I made my pencil marks, and then had to hand file and hand cut the leaves to replace this arbor. Next one. On another broken arbor, bad arbor, I cannibalized. Here's one with broken leaves and a broken pinion. And I cannibalized another one, and I example parts in this box. And I'm going to, I drilled into here and I drilled in here, put a pin in here and join them together. Next. Here's the 3 wheels that we started with, and these mark where that's a replacement tooth, 2 replacement teeth, 3 replacement teeth, and then to replace the arbor, all ready to go. Next slide. Okay, the next project is making replacement feet for a triple decker clock. Another, again, square piece. I usually take what do you call it, what's the tool? And before I start running on my lathe, I'll take the corners off. So I'm not, when you come around on the lathe and try to chisel, it's quite a shock. So, but I marked off in pencil where these feet are gonna end and begin. Next slide. Okay, so here we are, partway into the project. It's gonna be 4 feet. It's gonna be 2 back feet and 2 front teeth. Not teeth, I'm sorry. Feet, not teeth. Okay, next one. All right, so here we got shape now, pretty well along in the process. Next slide. And there's the 4 feet stained and ready to go. Next slide. It's replacing making new finials. New finial. You got to measure off everything. Make sure you have enough space in between the work with the tools. Next slide. Here's replacing a column. I think that was your plot, Dan, wasn't it? Your case.
Yes, it was.
Had a pillar and scroll, and he was missing one of the columns. So again, working with a blank piece of mahogany. And we're going to make a replica of this particular column. Next. All right, so I got a 36-inch bed lathe, and we're starting to work on that square piece. Next slide. And here we are matching up the replica with the original, pretty far along at this point in time. Next slide. Here's the comparison, looking on the length of the columns, the original and the replacement. You got to measure, because if you go too far, if you cut it down, you have to start all over again. So it's a constant measuring with the calipers, so forth. Length and all your dimensions. Okay. All right, here the column is pretty well finished. And okay. All right, now here it's easier to stain it while it's in the lathe. And of course, I've got it longer than it needs to be because just take it out of the lathe and cut it off. but we're matching the stain in this case to the original down here. Okay. All right. This is another project. There's our friend, the late Glenn Alexander. And one Tuesday evening, he brought this case to me and it was missing a whole lot of stuff. But it's a Virgin Ives, and this particular Virgin Ives, when they were John Burge and Joseph Ives were together for 1 year, I think it was 1823. And so it's a fairly rare label, Virgin Ives. And I only found one picture of in one of my books showing what this clock should look like. So, and you can see there's no bottom door. There was no movement. It is the original mirror. And these columns at the top, right away you can see that these columns don't match up with the gilded columns down below. There was no movement, there's no top to the case. So it's like, look, do you look a gift horse in the mouth or what? But it was another challenge, so I took it on. So go to the next one. Here's a picture from the contribution of Joseph Ives, Connecticut clock technology. This is what the clock should look like when it's finished. Had paw feet, and of course a Virgin Ives, I'm sorry, a Joseph Ives movement with a carved splat, gilded splat. Of course, the clock that Glenn gave me was missing the chimneys, missing the splat, bottom door, movement, not a lot there. Next slide. First thing I did was take the whole movement apart. And this is all the pieces of the case. I always find it easier when you gotta do a major restoration to go ahead and dismantle the whole thing. Next. So, did we miss a slide? Okay, so here's the columns that were at the top that were not original. Unfortunately, I was able to see the shadow marks, the shading on the front of the case, so I could take some tracing paper, and I ended up making a pattern out of paper of what the columns should look like. Fortunately for the age of the stain, it was visible what the outline of the new columns were like. Next slide. So I would trying to think for weeks. I kept mulling over in my mind how I'm going to make two half columns. Can't take a dowel and just slice it down the middle. And finally, I think it was during the night, it came to me that I should take two pieces of white pine and 1 by 2, full 1 inch by 2 inches. 1 by 1, I guess it is, 1 by 1. And I glued them together, but I only glued them I made them longer than they had to be. So I glued the two pieces together at the end and over here. Okay, next slide. So again, on my lathe, started working, and you can see the extra length here and here that are glued together. You can see the pile of sawdust and then some of the turning tools along with the pattern, and just trying to make these columns. Okay. Here we're further along. more sawdust, all the tools. That's the pattern that I'm working against. It's a measure, 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 measure process to get it down to the right foot of measurements. Next slide. Here we are pretty far along, and got to start working with sandpaper and smaller files to get it smooth, to get your final product. Okay. All right, here I now separated the two pieces because I cut off the sides, the ends that were glued. And there is a comparison to the paper pattern, duplicating it. Next. I sent these off to Dave Lima up in Ohio, and he gilded them, and the centers are tortoise shell, replicating what they should look like. Next. And then I had to get a new movement. This is an Ives Swiss cheese movement because it's got the holes, the round holes. Ives made a variety of these strap press movements, and some had different teeth, fine teeth. Some had bulkier teeth. And he kept revising he was a tinkerer, like I said, Bernie Teacup was, or Bernie, always looking for different ways to make things. And Ives was that way. Okay. Now here's the case. Oh, a new door, bottom door I made, new splat, new side rails, new caps, new chimneys. I had to order the paw feet. I don't know how to make those. I don't have the capability or the tools to make those. But everything's now restored and stained and ready to go back together. There's the finished product. I had Lee Davis make the gilded splat. There's the new columns, the original mirror back in. And Lee Davis did the reverse painting for me. And Lee happened to have, he was doing a glass for somebody else for a same Burge and Ives clock. So this is a replica of what one should look like. Kathy, Dial House 2, restored the dial for me. So it's not only a lot of work, but it's a lot of expense.
Yeah.
So I've got probably $600 into restoring it, but it's a beauty and a rare clock. So anyway, so I took it on as a challenge, and that's what it ended up to be. All right. Here was another separate little project. Was missing a chimney, a rosette that was missing for another clock. And my wood lathe doesn't have a chuck, so I couldn't make it on my wood lathe. So I rigged up a thing on my Chinese metal lathe, and so I could put my wood tool, my wood files, marked all of the circles in pencil, and head on the lathe. I was able to use my wood turning tools to make the rosette. Next slide. So here's the side view I put a dowel in with a Forstner bit and put it in my metal lathe. And then that's the side view of the rosette chimney. Then I had to make new cap, which are pretty tricky to make because they're only like 2 inches long, and yet they're routed. The edges are routed on 3 sides. And when you put it in your router table, it's hard to keep it without moving. And then you got to end up so that the base, this side, this is the base, it's got to fit on top of this here, so it matches the same size. I had to make a new return. These are typically veneered with mahogany. So anyway, that's the 3 pieces that go on the top of a clock. So the chimney, the cap, and the return. And of course, this dowel comes out. I use the Forstner bit to drill it into the back of the chimney. And that's what you'll see on the back of these rosette chimneys. You're going to see a hole in the back of them because they were done the same with a temporary dowel. Next. And there's the front view of the rosette with a cap, with a return, and the base that fits under the chimney. All stained and ready to be shellacked. And of course, I didn't make 2 of them. One of them must, I guess I copied what was one of them that I had. Next slide. This is another little project. As somebody needed a finial, I can't remember who it was, but I'm making a new finial for a clock for our Vienna regulator. And that might be the only one of them. So it's, like I say, it's, you've got to have enough, got to measure out everything to make sure you have enough room for the dowel that's going to be inserted into the case. And you got to have enough room to work. So all got to be measured out ahead of time. And I usually use pencil marks on my stock, so I know where to cut. Measuring. So it's, anyway, next slide. So there's and I stained the replica to match the original. It looks pretty close. Can you tell which is which?
What's the answer?
Huh?
What's the answer?
The bottom one is the replacement. So, but anyway, you know, I went to high school. I never had shop, never learned how to do woodworking. So all of the stuff I've been doing has been, I claim to be self-taught, I guess. So, and I don't claim to be an expert in it, but I've learned over the years by trial and error to do all this stuff. Anyway, next slide.
Further results.
Absolutely.
Then this is a project, Bernie's shop. You know, Bernie, like I say, was like Joseph Ives, constantly tinkering, and every time he went to Bernie's shop, he had new ideas about something that he wanted to do differently than what maybe the week before. He was always coming up with new stuff. So he had a number of classes, so-called classes at his shop over the years. And this was one of the, I think, Chris, the last
Last
was
one.
making these lighthouse clocks. Next slide. And we can't really call the lighthouse clocks were made by Simon Willard with patent alarm timepieces. And it's hard to call them replicas because Simon Willard, every lighthouse clock he made was different. It seems like anyway, no two alike, so ours are kind of a generalized replica of what he did. So I think Charles Brooke came up with the idea of using porch columns from Home Depot to be the center part of our cases for these lighthouse clocks. And we were removing the white outer layers on Bernie's lathe at his shop. Next slide. And there's Chris and I. On this one, we're putting new veneer over the stripped down column parts. They were measured and cut into the right length. And what we did was put glue on the column. I don't know if we did it on the veneer as well, but anyway, we let it get to a point where it was tacky. And then we took on the lathe, this big lathe, and we used the iron and rotated the case part and ironed the veneer on.
Did you use heat with the iron?
Huh?
Did you
Oh,
heat
yeah.
the iron?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, not hot, but definitely warm.
okay.
Next slide. In my shop, one of my duties was, and we worked as a team, and we show up at Bernie's shop, some of us, a couple of us. It was what, Bill Knack, Chris Martin, myself, Byron T-Cap, Bernie,
Charlie.
and Charlie Rook. So we showed up at various times over a good year, I guess it was. We would all contribute to making parts or doing stuff. So at my house on my router, I was making the base molding. I made, I don't know how many feet of that, but anyway, next slide. So here's, looking from the bottom up, is the molding around the outside, the base of the clock case. And this is the inner parts that were glued together because the base is octagonal. So you get all these clamps holding the molding on. Next slide. In my shop, I have, there's the base, there's the molding attached. There's the center column part that we made from porch columns. And these are a couple of the ring parts that we're going to go to the case. Next slide. All right, here's all those components now glued together, except this part was just sitting on the case. But you can see the various colors to the veneer that are going to have to be matched up. Some a little darker than others, particularly the turned. These bigger pieces were turned on Bernie's lathe. Next slide. All right, so here's the components all put together but stained, and the feet now on the bottom. Brass ball feet. Next slide. All right, this is my example. Again, we made about how many, 8 or 10 cases all together. And you can see the feet, the molding that was made earlier, and all the pieces now stained. And I got one of these little emblems, brass emblems from online from a jewelry store somewhere. And they're only a couple bucks each, but it has a rope and an anchor, sort of to go with a lighthouse theme. Can't call our clocks as replicas because Simon Willard, every lighthouse clock he made, it seemed like they were different. So there's no one pattern, not like he's made a number of lighthouse clocks the same. They were all, when you look at the books about his lighthouse, patent alarm lighthouse clocks, they're all different. Some have rectangular bases, some have octagon, they're all different. Next slide. I had a dial made by Pro Clocks. I found the lettering online that I could write my name on. And I put St. Simon's. We used to have a condo at St. Simon's. So I thought, well, that goes with the lighthouse clock. So, but anyway, Pro Clocks sent and made porcelain dial in China. They did a great job. They really, and so I had sent them my signature and sent them this and the dial, and they had made it porcelain and really nice, really came out nice.
Yes,
Bob Crowder, right.
and he's already registered.
Oh.
He's gonna be at the regional.
Okay. Next. There's the finished lighthouse clock. It has won first place in category of a chapter competition at the 2015 National Convention in Chattanooga. And Pete Schreiner in Florida, had to be very appreciative of him. He did some pinion work on my movement, and he put a passing strike. You can see the hammer up there by the bell. He put the bell stand on as well. And so every hour it's just dings for once.
George, is that bell one of the ones that was done in the first project?
No, it's just a oval bell. You can't find the original shaped bells for these things.
This is the second time we've done this at Bernie's shop. And the first go around, which one of the clocks was donated to the National Museum, they actually duplicated one of the bells that was on an original and had somebody do the foundry work and pour it and all that. And I think that was, so I don't think any of those were left from that first project.
No. Sam Ledbetter was involved in that.
Yeah, yeah.
And they had trouble with the movements and that first go around that Bernie group made the first round of lighthouse clocks. Okay, and this is going to be on exhibit at the Mid-South coming up in.
So if you want to see the real thing, you have to come up and look at it. We'll have either 2 or maybe 3 of those clocks from that class will be in the exhibit.
Next slide. I just wanted to mention in doing the work that I've done. Some years ago, early on, I used to use the paint stripper. Was that, what is it, benzene? Hold on a second. Let me get. So originally, years ago, for stripping down these cases, I used to use the methylene chloride strippers, most of which were banned some years back because of, if you were in the same room with those things, the vapors were terrible. I used to use them outside when the weather was good. I didn't want to breathe that stuff while I was in the same building. So a friend of ours put me onto Franmar's soy gel, which was supposed to be a much safer stripper. But there were some warnings. There was no vapor from it. It was very easy to use. It stayed wet on the surface. It was really a good stripper, and they're still making it. It's under Blue Bear right now. But there were some warnings particularly from California. I think everything's banned in California, but
Yes.
Anyway, for birth defects and reproductive issues. So while I was doing another article for the Cog Counters Journal, they talked about Franmore and the soy gel. It has no methylene chloride, but it does include, it does have NMP, methyl 2-pyridylene, which apparently came close to having soy gel being banned in 2018, but it's still available. But it's, these two products are now highly recommended, and that's being much safer. I really haven't used them up, because I haven't done any recent projects, but these are the two that are most highly recommended now as being safe. Citrus Strip and 3M Safest Stripper. Next. One of the principles I try to employ is to use products that were used when a lot of these clocks were manufactured, and most of them, up until probably recent years, used hide glue, and was the glue of choice. And for a lot of clocks cases, 200 years later, it's still holding on. And there are some, of course, clock cases where some of the veneer will peel off. But overall, hide glue is held up pretty well. It doesn't like moisture so much. So, the nice thing about it, when you're using it to restore a clock case, it is reversible. So somebody later on can take it apart, and if they want to do something different, it can be disassembled. I remember when I was using the regular Elmer's wood glue, when I was making a couple of grandfather clock cases, I glued two pieces of wood together, and shortly thereafter realized I made a mistake. And then hours later, I tried to get it apart, and I had to soak them in a deep sink for hours and hours and hours trying to get those two pieces apart. So compared to hide glue, it would be easily taken apart. So I like to use hide glue, particularly when you're doing restoration of antique clock cases.
How do you get them apart?
Uh,
How do you get them apart with the hide glue?
Well, heat or water, moisture. Try taking the Elmer's glue apart. It's a whole other ballgame. So anyway, a lot of times it has an expiration date on the bottle. I haven't really had a problem using it years later.
Where do you find that?
Most hardware stores carry it. Certainly, the one down in, what's the Highlands?
Virginia Highlands. Virginia Highlands,
the hardware store, they always carry it, but most of your hardware stores will carry it. Good stuff, easy to use, doesn't set up immediately, so if you make a mistake, get it apart. So there's just a couple of things that I found useful in doing the stuff I'm doing. First of all, when I cut veneer, I use a lot of painter's tape because I can use tape over my cut. When I'm cutting veneer, I use a box knife. Some people use a veneer saw, but I've just found these knives work just as good. And I'll usually put some painter's tape over where I'm going to cut the veneer so it doesn't splinter as much. And I use artist paint for matching up with my clock case stain. So I use these as a stain. It's artist paint, oil-based, burnt umber and burnt sienna are the ones I use the most to match up with early American cases. And I mix a little, I take a t-shirt, some t-shirt material, put a little bit of mineral oil, mineral spirits, and then dab on this burnt umber and rub it onto the case. That's what I use for the lighthouse cases, and you can match up very well with any of the old clock case stains. And instead of trying to use these can stains. So you just put on layers and layers of it as you need, and you put more mineral spirits on to lighten it up or whatever. So it works really well. So you're going to use them as a stain, not as a paint. And for gluing, if I have a real small piece of veneer I'm replacing on a clock case, I just tear off a match from a book of matches and use the broken end down here as a little brush to put the glue on the little piece of veneer. And if I've got a larger piece of veneer, I use a acid brush. And then if I really have a lot of bigger piece of veneer to put on a case, this is kind of crumpled up now, but it's a little paint roller. And I use that to take a paper plate and put a bunch of hide glue on it, and then roll it onto the case, and then attach my veneer. So these are just a couple of ideas for using various tools. And then, of course, I use the can of ready-made shellac. Shellac was the choice, was the material used to finish early American clock cases for many years. I guess now they use more veneers, more varnishes, but shellac is the historically used product. So I used, and out of the can, never had a problem with shellac, even a couple of years, and for years, never had a problem with it not working well. Like on that lighthouse clock, I probably put most of my work, I put about 4 coats of shellac. And then when I'm all finished, I go back and rub it all down with 4-0 steel wool, a little bit of olive oil, and it really smooths it out. It gives you a beautiful finish. So I didn't put the olive oil on there, and I didn't put the shellac can, but right out of the can. Some people use the shellac flakes to make their own shellac. I've never had a problem with canned shellac, even years later. So it used to be a little bit trickier with age, but I've not had a problem. Let's see. So this, I have pictures on a card on the table of a Seth Thomas Pillar and Scroll that I made from Raspberry, I think it was, some years ago. And this clock was, there's a whole bunch of pictures up here on this placard, but he had this clock for sale, and it was in terrible condition. They put a wood brass movement in it and took out the wood movement. They drilled extra holes in the dial. they took. When I found it, it was, somebody had put like 3 or 4 inch finishing nails down, straight down to the arches. And the bottom, the base was all torn up. And you can see it in the pictures here on the table. And our friend Rick Mangum did a replica glass for me. I found a 30-hour Terry movement online. That was a Seth Thomas. This has a Seth Thomas label. But I had to take this clock and do a lot of restoration. And it came out really nice. And Kathy did a beautiful job on the dial, restoring the dial. Next. And that's the place, if you want to go see rare woods and veneers, pay a visit to Carlton McClendon, Hemphill Avenue, right by Northside Drive, Hemphill and 14th. Like I say, in the front building, they have all kinds of rare woods, pieces, all different sizes for woodworkers. And in the back, they have a warehouse. It's filled with veneers. It's unbelievable, the stores we have. Good place. And that's, I have that. This is here on the front table, but that's some of the pictures of, like I had to take the base, I took it completely apart. That's some example of the botched works. It's a mess. And I want to thank Mary Jones for, I don't know how many times we got together doing all this, putting this all together. And thank you, Mary. Mary did the PowerPoint and stuff. So anyway, any questions? Yeah.
What glue do you use when you replace, what glue do you use when you replace the teak on a wooden movement?
I use high glue.
Oh, you use high glue on this?
Yeah.
And when you made the lighthouse clock, did you use high glue on that?
Putting the pieces together, the case pieces, yes.
That's high glue also.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's my favorite.
How do you use an iron veneer? Do you just apply the iron directly to the veneer? Or do you? put
Yeah,
it all-
right on the veneer itself.
You don't worry about burning it or?
No, it's not gonna be that.
It's a very low heat, just enough to warm up the wood and the glue.
Yeah, there's glue underneath it.
It's amazing how Chris and I were doing that, rolling that veneer on. I mean, that's how many years ago now? 6 or 7 years ago or more. And then veneer is held beautifully. Yeah.
Some veneer has that marquetry in it, the carved pieces in the veneer. Do you still use, can you still use an iron veneer that has like carved pieces in it, like marquetry? Or like a table? Or,
Not sure.
I guess you could, I guess.
I-
Yeah, like some cases, some veneer has like it'll be veneer and then it'll have carved pieces in the veneer and decorative into the veneer. And that's just a piece of veneer. So press down on the heat to it, you have multiple pieces of veneer. Maybe not that like.
Well, I mean, well, first, for flat surfaces, I don't usually use an iron. I just clamp the veneer on. But you can't clamp the round pillar. So flat surfaces, you could use another piece of wood, piece of plywood, whatever. You get your veneer on, you can clamp it. I was just talking about on a column like that round surface. Right. Normally, I wouldn't use an iron.
Would you get bubbles underneath it? Otherwise? Does it help, like, help bend more to do this?
Yeah. Came out.
Yeah.
Any other? Yes.
Just one final comment. If you could let everyone know that your workday is tomorrow.
Oh. Tomorrow, I hope to make it to 87. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, by the way. Love you all, and just can't thank our organization, our chapter, for how many friends we've made over the years. Next year will be mine. I've been a member of NAWCC for 50 years, so it's and I love the bulletins they put out. I love the material. I think it's a great organization. And it's not just about collecting clocks. I would say it's about collecting friends. You know. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Want to take a look at the Todd Counter's journal? I've got a box, cigar box full of pieces of veneer. And then down on the floor, there's a box with all kinds of Turi type clock parts for the movements. Anyway, just look around. If anybody needs veneer, I think I've got it. And, but give it a try. I mean, I never had anything like shop in high school or anything like that. This is all the stuff I've learned on my own, just practicing and learning. And I started out making birdhouses and stuff like that. And so it's been a journey. And I appreciate you all. One other little thing. When you're working on a lathe, particularly wood lathe, it's critical that you get the dowel or the piece you're working with centered on the lathe. And this little tool, plastic tool, is a great thing. And it has a way to, on one side, you can put it on top, the top edge of a dowel. And on the other side, you have a square piece, and you can draw your lines so you can cross them. And then you find your center that way. And I usually take a nail and hammer the nail partway into the end of the piece I'm going to put in the lathe so that I have a center. And then I do the same thing on the other end of the piece. So you got to cross where you're using this tool. You end up with a scribe cross and put a point with a nail and at the X and then put it in the lathe. So you got the wood plank centered. So this little thing I probably paid a couple of bucks for really comes in handy. But you got to have a way to make sure you find center to start. Otherwise, your work's going to be off. Always. Thank you.
Let's all give George a big round of applause. We make friends and we learn so much, and I didn't have shop in high school either. They made me go to home ec.
I didn't even have that.
In that era, I did have a teacher who said they always send the boys to home ec and the girls to shop. Sounded pretty logical, because otherwise we learned our skills at home anyway, didn't we, Donna? All right, well, thank you all so much for coming and for being here, and we will be back the first Sunday of April, August, sorry, the other 8 months. So plan to see everybody then. Y'all take care.
Hey, Chris. Okay, sure. Chris.
Uh,